So Nathan, thank you so much for joining me on the Teachers Podcast today.
You're welcome.
We are at Lead Learn Lancs 2019. So I've got about 5 podcast interviews lined up. So thank you for being the first one today. So we're going to talk about technology in the classroom, but I thought it would be really helpful if you could just give me a backstory of how you got into teaching, what you've done in teaching so far, just so we know who you are.
No problem. Well, actually, I wasn't going to go into teaching. When I left university, I went to be a sabbatical officer, so I was sort of like the vice president of our students' union.
Yeah.
And thought, what do I do in my life after that? Mm-hmm. I studied theatre, film and TV at uni, and then was doing a bit of rugby coaching. And some of the coaches there said, oh, you're really good with kids. So I thought, how about I'll go into teaching? And actually, I applied to go into primary teaching at first.
Okay.
However, I also wrote a letter to my old school, said, I fancy going into teaching. They said, actually, we've got a vacancy for media teaching now. Right. Come on down and we'll train you up on the job. Wow. And we'll employ you as an unqualified teacher. So I did my, I can't remember what it's called now, it's employment-based training.
Yeah.
With them down in Kent in 2005. Mm-hmm. So I trained in English and media at secondary school. And then as my career progressed, I became head of film and media school in Oldham. Yeah. From there, I got an interest in new technology and how it could improve things in the classroom. Mm-hmm. And then sort of went to specialise in that. And I've now been at 2 schools as a lead teacher for new technologies. And I've been at my current school for 5 years.
That's amazing. So obviously we had a chat beforehand and you told me that your children at your school, they all have an iPad, which is amazing. I feel like I could totally get on board with that. But why are you so passionate about children having an iPad?
Well, I think having technology in their hands, which they're used to having, if you like. So students these days are used to using mobile phones, used to using iPads and tablets at home. Yeah. So bringing that into the classroom setting, they're already sort of, we call them digital natives, if you like. They're already used to using that technology, but it's teaching them to use it for something more positive and productive. And that brings real benefits. First of all, every student in the classroom can respond to the teacher instantly. And in terms of things like assessment, you can gauge their understanding in a really, really quick way, better than you could without the technology. Because I've got a real sort of, I'd say, a passion for using the technology where it's purposeful and has real meaning. There's no point in using it if it doesn't actually improve anything that you're doing. So in terms of something like assessment, where you can instantly see where the kids are at, what they're doing, what their understanding is like in terms of assessment for learning, it's a really, really useful tool for the teacher to then be able to plan and move things forward.
So how much are they used in lessons then, these iPads?
So sometimes it might be used for 5 minutes of a lesson, maybe for a quick starter activity. Sometimes it might be used for the entire lesson. It just depends what they're doing. We don't sort of prescribe to our teachers, this is what you must do. And I'm trying to sort of also get away from, let's have an iPad lesson, let's get the arcade, let's get the devices out. Yeah. It's more of a fluid thing. Right, okay kids, we're going to use this, get your iPads out. Or however, another scenario could be, right students, I'd like you to complete this task. Then the students may also ask, can I get my iPad out to do my task on that?
Right, so they can choose then.
Yeah.
And I like that.
Some teachers are more responsive to that than others. Yeah. But it becomes part of their toolkit, part of their pencil case, It's just another tool to use in the classroom. Yeah. And what we try and do is to prepare students for that. So the students have a iPad induction, right? 2-day iPad induction. Yeah. Where all they're learning is about how to use the iPad in a safe way, and also how to use it in a productive way in the classroom. So they then can go into any lesson in the school and be prepared to use it for whatever task the teacher wants them to. Yeah. We also have to obviously train the teachers as well.
Yeah. I like what you said about them being able to choose, because I think, well, I suppose obviously you're in secondary school and it's quite a responsible thing, but definitely, upper key stage 2 could make that choice, because that's what we do as an adult, isn't it? We decide whether we're going to use the iPad. Like, I always bring my iPad for my notes, but I like to type it up on the laptop because it's easier. But obviously, this is much better for the podcast.
Well, students are so creative. So if you're saying to a student, okay, I want you to demonstrate the water cycle to me, they could probably draw it on paper. Yeah. But a lot of students could probably animate it using an iPad and using apps on there.
Apps that the teacher might not even know about.
Perhaps, exactly.
Yeah.
So why not give the students that autonomy to be able to choose to do that? Or they can make a little video in iMovie.
Yeah.
And students are already making videos at home. You know, the top job, if you go into a class full of year 6 students and say to them, what do you want to be? The most popular job will probably be a YouTuber.
Yes, of course. Yeah, and I've talked about that on the podcast before.
Right.
And when I think back, so I was in the days of, PowerPoint had just been released, and I did make PowerPoints at home. I made PowerPoints do what then they brought in later, because nothing would ever fly out. So I'd come up with creative ways, and I don't know why I did that, but if I were in school now, I'd be that kid who goes home and makes a video about it because it's just fun.
Exactly. And as a teacher, I used to teach stop motion animation. But you can actually do stop motion animation on a keynote presentation on an iPad quite easily, or you can use a stop motion app on there to do something similar. And often some kids in the class will be doing that at home. So it's about giving the kids the opportunity to show their creativity and having a multimedia device in front of them, which has got a camera, it's got a voice recorder. You can take a photo, and you can combine all those elements as well in interactive books.
Yeah.
Well, why not use that? Why not harness that technology? Because not only is that making them think about a variety of skills in terms of the metacognition and what should I use for what, but also preparing them for life after school as well. Because they may have to go into a situation where their boss says, right, I want you to create a project on X, Y, Z. And then they know how to do it, and they've got the skills to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. So these iPads then, so we've talked about maybe using different apps. Are they locked down then, or are they allowed to download apps that they want?
A little bit of both, to be honest with you. So we lock them down with our key core apps to start with. It's then up to the parents whether they want to allow them to download other apps.
Right, okay.
Also, we are quite fluid in that if the teacher throughout the year discovers an app that they want to have onto the iPads, we can then sort of assess it and say, first of all, how much does it cost? Can we afford it? But also, how valid is it for the classroom? We can then roll that out across all the iPads in the academy.
So what happens then, because I've kind of heard a little bit about it, is it where the school purchases it and then all of them update?
That's exactly right, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's insane. Like, what are the kind of costs for one app?
Well, it depends. To be honest with you, the only app which we actually buy is Book Creator.
Right.
All the rest are free.
Oh, wow.
Now, there are some apps which you can sort of pay for the pro version of.
Yeah.
However, unless you actually need the pro tools for a specific reason, we don't need to do that.
Yeah.
Actually, I'm probably lying a little bit. We pay for Book Creator. We also pay for Firefly, which isn't necessarily an app. It's more of a learner management system.
Right. Okay.
So our students don't have paper planners. They organise
all
their work on their iPad.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. We have calendars on our phones, don't we?
Exactly. So we as teachers will set the homework via Firefly. They can check it off on there. The parents also have a Firefly account, so they can check what homework the students have got.
Yeah.
So then we encourage the parents to have that conversation, you haven't done your homework yet, let's tick it off. But it's not just a homework tool, it's about also organising their classroom learning as well. So you can send them digital resources. So rather than saying, going to the photocopier and printing off 30 pages or whatever, you can say, right, go on Firefly, I've sent you this resource, have a scan through it. They can PDF, they can annotate it, they can highlight it on their device, and then they can use it for written work.
Yeah.
One of the sort of the key things we say within my school is that we complement traditional learning methods with technology. So they're not just using the technology for everything yet, because they have to sit an exam with a pen in their hand and paper.
And it's still a really useful skill. And as a resource company, that's something that we think about a lot. And one of the reasons why we're kind of stuck is that children in primary school don't have an iPad each, because if they did, it would be amazing. We would just don't print it out.
Yeah, totally.
And we'd just arrange them differently. But do you think, obviously I don't know how much you visit primary schools, but do you think that secondary schools are much better at using the technology and kind of preparing the students and treating them more in a way that adults use technology in their lives?
There's a difference. So with what you find in secondary schools is that using the technology is all geared around how the students can be independent in their academic studies in terms of, I've sent you this video that I've made on something to do with science. go and look at that, and then come to the classroom ready to go with that knowledge in your head. So it's kind of like that flipped learning process.
Yes, yes.
So they might use GCSE Pod, for instance, to listen to watch this podcast, or listen to this podcast, and then do this test on it. So there's a lot geared around assessment, really. What I'd say in terms of primary schools that I've been to and worked with, it's more to do with the creative application of their understanding. So whereas in primary schools, you've got a bit more room, if you like, to create a video, create a presentation on something. You can then go through the learning process, and then they use that device for creative application of work. You can still use it for assessment and things at primary school, but the creative application of work isn't done as much at, let's say, GCSE level, maybe at Key Stage 3, but GCSE, because it's, you've got to get your head down, got to get your mind on your studies, it's used much more for assessment.
Yeah, thank you. Obviously, iPads are really expensive, really expensive. I was looking up the other day because we're going to be setting up a foundation which is going to provide iPads or other technologies. What do you think? Is it worth shelling out to get an iPad, or can you do some of these things, say, like on an Amazon Fire tablet?
You definitely can, because more and more the app, if you like, is kind of disappearing from some devices. It's more to do with an online presence. So you've got an online website which will do the same as that an app can do.
Device agnostic.
Yeah, exactly. All I'd say is that with an iPad, it's much more user-friendly to be able to sort of go from one app to another, to share, to collaborate on work, to share work from one device to another. And because you've got that multimedia device, and it's they are designed to be get them out of the packet and you can just use them. So that's why we've gone for iPads. Now, yes, there is an expense there. Our parents pay a certain price per month, and then after 3 years, the device is theirs to take home.
Okay. But how often do they have to replace that, because technology moves on so fast?
Very, very true. That's why we have like a 3-year scheme. And then after that year, we then offer a buyback scheme where if the iPad's in really good condition, they can trade that iPad in, and then they can get the value of that against the cost of a new device. Yeah, because like you say, it does change very, very quickly.
Yeah. And do they have to have a certain type? Like, does everyone have like an iPad mini, or?
We just say it has to be able to run iOS, sort of like iOS 12, if you like. So not the latest operating system, but the one just before, because some apps then do become defunct because they don't work on older operating systems.
So do some children already have an iPad and they don't go on the scheme and they just bring it?
That's right. So we have sort of like 3 options. You can either buy a device through the school scheme, you can bring in your own device, or if some parents don't want to purchase a device, or they can't, we can then have a loan devices, which we have in school, and the student picks it up every day and then takes it back at the end of the day.
Right, okay, so they're not allowed to take it home?
No, and that's not if I could sort of like, in the perfect world, yes, they could take it home, because taking the learning home from the classroom,
is one of the reasons for having it.
Is great, yeah, but there's ways around it. Like I said before, most people who create an app have got a website or somewhere on the cloud that can save some work.
Also, it's difficult, isn't it? Because at the end of the day, it's so saleable.
Yeah.
So I can completely understand why you don't send them home.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Although I've worked in two schools now over the sort of past 6 years, running these iPad schemes, and never had a device stolen.
Which is amazing. That's absolutely amazing.
Devices have been broken, and we have sort of like a repair and admin sort of side of it.
Yeah.
Not many, to be honest with you, because the cases are really good. But yeah, we've never had a device stolen. I don't know why, but it's great. That's brilliant. It's really good, though.
That is really good. So obviously they're so expensive, and I know that the funding's relative, but secondary schools, because they've got more students, they end up with a bigger pot of money. Are there any funding pots that you know of that primary schools could tap into to get them? Because I think not many primary schools even have a class set of iPads.
Yeah, and a class set's great, actually. But Rocket Fund is something I have heard about.
Right, okay.
Now, because obviously the way we run our scheme, I haven't had to sort of do that, but so I haven't got loads of details about it, but it's something that primary school teachers could definitely have a look at, Rocket Fund. Again, I don't know exactly how it works, but there's definitely a pot of money there. I think they'll sort of like match some of the fundraising that you do at school.
Right, okay, brilliant.
and then you can buy some devices.
So it's worth looking at.
Yeah.
We'll research that and put it in the show notes. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay then. So have you got any ideas of how a teacher listening now could use iPads or that kind of technology to reduce their workload?
At first, yeah, definitely. And marking is one of them for me especially. I teach English and I also teach A-level media as well.
Mm-hmm.
And the mark load is
There's a lot of writing in
There's
English. Secondary.
There is a lot of writing, and you've got to read every single word.
Yeah.
And you're not always just marking for sort of like spag. You know, you're marking for their understanding as well. So you've got to read absolutely everything. So I use audio feedback, which is basically you scan a QR code.
Mm-hmm.
It comes up with a little sort of like recorder on your iPad or even on a mobile phone.
Yeah.
You record your voice. You can pause it and start it again. So I might sort of like stop on the kids' work, put point number 1 in pen on their work, but then record point number 1.
Yeah.
So what they need to do, pause it, go to point number 2, and do that throughout the whole piece of work, and then hand it back to them. Now the great thing about that is it saved my time, because I haven't had to sort of go through it with loads of pen.
Yeah.
Much quicker to talk than it is to write.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the biggest benefit is then the student, because the student can hear my personalised feedback to them.
Yeah.
And they can then action that feedback straight away.
They can also hear your intention, I guess, as well, because you read it in your own voice, don't you, rather than your voice, and they'll hear the sentiment behind it.
Exactly. And I can explain theories, I can explain concepts, I can rephrase sentences for them. This would sound better.
Yeah.
And then when they come to then sort of red pen it, if you like, they can then action that straight away. And the students have found it really, really helpful. So not only does it save me time, but the feedback becomes much more useful and beneficial for the students.
So what do you do then? Do you sort of record it and then upload it to their area or something so they can listen? Or
So that's that same QR code that I've scanned. The student, I give that to the student. The student then scans the QR code, headphones in, and they can hear it.
Wow.
And the great thing is it's there for like 5 years. So if
they can go back and listen to it.
Exactly. They can pause it, they can go back and listen to it. When they're doing the revision, like the headphones in again, have a listen to it.
Another thought, obviously I'm assuming that's when they've written it down. Do they ever type any of the work up sort of on their iPad or?
Yeah, they do. And again, that makes things a bit quicker as well.
And can you get it to talk to you so you don't have to read it?
Yes, you
can
can.
just listen to it.
Yes, you can. Yeah. And so there's various different apps out there.
Yeah.
The app we use in terms of Firefly, students can submit their work electronically. Now that could be a piece of written work, it could be a video, it could even be a voice note. You know, you don't have to get students to write everything. You know, explaining to me the water cycle. You know, in audio. What you can then do is give them some feedback through audio or through video, or you can write it if you want to as well. So having that device in front of you just gives you all those options which you didn't have before. Yeah,
I have to say, even at Classroom Secrets now, because we do have people who work from home and they don't come in the office that much, and we find video a really helpful way. Rather than sort of writing an update, I can just quickly do a video. Everybody can see exactly what it was with the same intention as everybody else, and you just fire it out, update in 5 minutes. It's amazing.
And you do find more and more teachers in their own social lives, they'll make little videos for their friends, whatever, put them on social media. Yeah. So younger teachers, I would say, become more comfortable in being in front of camera.
Yes, yes.
So use that, you know, make videos for your students. They'd much rather hear it from you than they would from someone else they don't know.
And I guess as well, if there's certain things that are quite difficult, in fact, actually, I used to be a secondary teacher as well. And I taught performing arts, so we're from a similar ilk. But what I did is the changing rooms were quite far away from the dance studio. So I used Audacity and I actually did about 5 different warm-ups, and I did a voiceover and I taught them the routine, and then when they knew it, because it kind of, and it was like, you know, and grapevine to the left and grapevine to the right, and they'd just do it, and I could go off and lock the changing rooms and everything. It was great. And I think, yeah, you could do that if you had to teach the same geography lesson 5 times. You could do a video, so you only had to deliver it once.
Yeah, there is that, and I think some people would say that the role of a teacher is changing in that sense as well.
Yeah.
Because there's so much knowledge out there, not just through video, but also just to go on the internet and find things out. Sometimes if you do that flipped learning method where the students have learnt the content at home, the teacher might then become more of a facilitator. But I don't think there's any replacing a teacher in the classroom, even if you've made a little video.
No, you could, because that's when you could use the opportunity to go around, or you could give other students feedback or something.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
But you come back to that other point you said about the video as well. We had a dance teacher who really embraced the use of video in her classroom. So she would video herself doing a routine. The students would learn it. The students would then video themselves doing a routine, and they would upload their videos. It's called Huddle Technique, the app. To this Huddle Technique, she would then go on there, and not only could she watch the video, she can pause the video. She can then draw on the video and say, your leg's not quite straight here, or your toes aren't pointed here. So I'm not a dance teacher.
Yeah, no, that's
anyway,
correct, though,
but she could then draw lines on it and say, well, you should be over here. This
Yeah.
technique isn't quite right.
It's amazing.
And then send it back to them.
Yeah.
And then they could then watch that and give feedback on that, and then alter it for next time. So it's just using technology in really smart ways to make life easier for yourself. The only thing is that some of the teachers find it an obstacle straight away because they're thinking, I can't use this.
Yeah.
So it's my job to try and get alongside them and make that process a bit easier, and not just sort of like say, this is how you do it, bye-bye, see you later. This is how you do it, and come back to me if you've got any issues or problems, and we can work your way through it.
And I guess with those teachers as well, it's small steps, isn't it? It's like, right, well, let's embrace this technology first and let's work towards that. And then when we've got that, then we'll do this. Whereas I imagine some teachers will just come in and go, yeah, I can do it all. Yeah. That doesn't faze me. This is normal. This is my life. That's
right. But it's also finding that one thing with each individual teacher that's going to sort of spark their interest and think, actually, that's a problem I had, and that's the solution for it. Yeah. And even when I do my training with new staff, I might go through sort of 6-7 different apps over the space of 2 hours. But then I'll say, I don't expect you to use all of these apps next week. Yes. Just take one thing today that you've thought, actually, that's a really good idea for me in my classroom, and become a master of that. And then perhaps you can move to something else. Yeah. So talking about that in terms of quick wins, really, if a teacher's listening, what quick win kind of ideas have you got that they could just try, that are not going to cost a lot of money, that's going to be effective? Okay. If you've got a classroom full of, let's say, tablets or even laptops. Okay, like a class set that gets sent round as a book out. Yeah. So the class can get on those straight away. You've then, every single student then has the opportunity to give you their ideas in an instant with certain different apps. So you can use something like Socrative, which is one that I use quite a lot. There is a pro version, but I tend to use the free version. But with that, there's a short answer function on there. You can ask the class a question verbally, or you can type it in and send it to them. They can all answer instantly. Now, what that does for me is, first of all, the little quiet kid at the back of the classroom who doesn't often put their hand up, I can see their ideas. Not only that, I can share their ideas with the rest of the class. So let's say you want the students to do some creative writing, but some students are really struggling with how to start their sentences. Let's ask the whole class an idea about how we can start this sentence. The other students then can use their ideas. So they've got the computer in front of them, but they've also got an exercise book. They've got all the class's ideas about whatever you just said, and they can then learn from that, and they can then start to form their own ideas. So it's using the technology to, initially it's quite isolated. You're by yourself on your own computer, but then using it collaboratively to then produce your work. What I like about that is it's transferable. You know, it's not for a specific subject. It could be used across anything. And I think you're right. You know, that child at the back who was very quiet and didn't say anything. It's not that they didn't want to share anything. It's that they don't know whether it's right. And if the teacher can see that it is right, that's when they share it. Exactly. Because it's not that they didn't want the work shared, they just didn't know it was correct. Yeah, and they only want the correct answer shared. Lacking a little bit of confidence sometimes, those kind of students, and obviously as a teacher, you still need to make sure you address misconceptions and say, actually, you know, I'm not going to send out wrong answers to all the kids in the classroom. But it's just another way of sort of like, if you like, mind mapping or having a collaborative space where you can work. And it's not just, there's other apps out there as well. There's one called Answer Garden, which is basically just a QR code. You scan it, and then a student can then write in whatever you've asked them to write in, and it comes as like a bit of like I don't know what to call it, a bit of word art. Right, and higher frequency words then appear a little bit larger. But those are really easy things to do,
Yeah.
quick things to do. You've got to sort of get your head around the software and make an account and all that stuff first of all. But once you've done that, it's really, really easy to do and quick.
Yeah, and I guess that's something, you know, you could have that a few times a week, and it's just drip feeding that technology in the classroom, isn't it, as you start. And the good thing is you mentioned that you can use that on a laptop, because lots of schools tend to just have laptops. That's usually the only IT they have now. Often a lot of schools don't have IT suites anymore, they just have laptop trolley. Yeah. Okay, so if you could wave a magic wand, I ask everyone this question, it's a difficult one. If you could wave a magic wand to solve the life-work balance problem for teachers, what would you do?
I would stop time.
Yes, that's the correct answer.
For a few different reasons. Obviously, you have a bit more time to rest.
Yeah.
At the same time, one of the sort of toughest parts of my job is finding the time to do teacher training. Yeah. You know, I'd love to be by the side of every single teacher in their classrooms and help them along the way with technology, but I can't do that. So if I could stop time and have that chunk of time to say, right, we're really going to get some training done. Yeah. We're going to go away, do what you need to do, come back to me, we'll stop time again and we'll see how you're getting on with it. That would be absolutely fantastic. Yeah.
And you do training on a consultant basis as well, don't you?
Yeah, I do, yeah. So I'm here today at Lead Learn Lancs. I'm not getting paid for today, just here as a freebie, but I'm actually talking about audio feedback and alternative feedback today. But I also do other work. I work with the Premier League. I'm an Apple Distinguished Educator, so I often get to go to their sort of big conferences globally. So in Texas a couple of years ago.
Wow, that's amazing.
And did a bit of a talk there as well on sort of what's going on in my classroom. So I do find it really useful to work with other teachers in all sorts of different contexts. Yeah. And also to learn from other teachers as well as they can learn from me. But yeah, I'm doing some work at half term with the Premier League with their sort of academies at different clubs. Just thinking about how to use the technology best in the classroom in the most meaningful and purposeful ways.
I think when you say about training, it's, to me, it's such a massive thing that it needs constant training, doesn't it? You know, it'd be great if every school had one of you where in staff meetings, you know, it's like, right, we're going to look at this app now and this is how we could use it in the classroom, and you've got 4 weeks to give it a go, and then another 4 weeks, right, now we're going to try and embed this one. It's just drip feeding, isn't it? But I think it is something that we just need a lot of training on. Like, this is good practice, basically.
Yeah, and what I try to do is to make little videos, because I don't always have that time to do those trainings.
That's a really good idea, and you can go back to it as well.
Exactly.
If you're not confident. Yeah.
And that's often like little quick wins, like we talked about before, or it might be something a bit more detailed, and then staff can then go back to those videos and think, actually, I need to try this, give this a go. How do I do this again? Yeah,
I definitely love that, and in fact, that's something we do with our training. We do videos so that as well, so you don't have to have it delivered so many times, and you can go back to it when you need to it and watch it when you want to. Okay, so that was a tricky question. Who was your favourite teacher at school and why?
My favourite teacher was a guy called Mr. Singh. I did performing arts as well at school, and he was my performing arts teacher. Funny actually, 'cause sometimes he was just such a funny character. He'd walk into like the dance studio, and he'd just be sat there in the middle of the dance studio like this. And he'd hear you come in, and he'd be like, Mr. Singh, and he'd go, just open one eye and close it again. And he just had to give him a minute, and then he'd finish doing whatever he was doing, and then he'd say, right guys, okay, what we do? Yeah, what we doing today? But not just that, obviously that was quite...
getting ready for your lesson.
Yeah, obviously that was quite funny. It did sort of calm us all down a little bit as well. Yeah. But he was also just so encouraging, and I remember just him giving me some really sort of wise words and just saying, Nathan, you know, you're really talented. You need to be really strong. I can see big things for you, and just give me loads of encouragement, but not in like a false sort of praise way. Being really genuine with me, and yeah, he just sort of got alongside you and encouraged you a lot. Yeah. And I tried to track him down actually, you know, and I don't know. He's fallen off the face of the earth. He's not on social media.
Oh, I hate that.
Yeah, it'd be really nice to sort of say, you know what, Mr. Singh, you were ace, you know what I mean? But there we go.
Oh, that's lovely. Who would you say your inspiration within education is now?
Oh, that's a good one. It's going to sound really cheesy, but I work with a really good team at school. Yeah. The teachers are so sort of up for trying things out, and I'd say the staff around me do inspire me. I hope I inspire them. Maybe I do.
Yeah.
They certainly do inspire me, and we do sort of learn from each other on a regular basis. So that's a really cheesy answer, but that's genuinely
It's a great
what I
answer
think.
though, and it's honest. Where do you think education needs to go in the next 10 years?
Now, I think where it needs to go, because obviously we have the technology which is advancing at a very, very fast pace. And I don't think that our exam system is sort of responding to that very well at the moment. So it's sort of like, okay, we need to get these kids tech savvy. We need to make sure they're able to be digital citizens.
Yeah.
However, they've still got to go into an exam hall and sit at an exam desk for 2 hours. And I don't think that's the best way of assessing what students can do. At the same time, I'm not sure they need to go into exam hall where there's a computer and do something like that either. I think there needs to be some other way of assessing students on more sort of like a fluid basis, using the technology which they have in their hands. So I can see there'd be sort of small changes over the next few years. But if I was to make that change, I'd make it a bit sooner and try and reassess how we do that. Because at the moment, even though I'm sort of saying to teachers, this is a really good way to sort of assess a student's understanding, teachers saying to me, well, actually, our students have still got to go into an exam hall with a pen and paper in their hand,
as well.
and they need that practice, which I completely understand.
Maybe it's about having the exam still for the moment, but also having other ways. You know, I guess like sometimes as coursework, maybe looking at that element of it.
Yeah, exactly.
Perhaps.
And we kind of lost that over the past sort of few years. That coursework element to a certain degree. And I kind of understand why, and I think students do need to be able to sit and write at length. That's definitely a skill they need to have. But there's so many other things and talents and skills which could be assessed as well. You know, we're sat here now making a podcast. You know, and this is a skill that all students are going to need and to actually hone, because a lot of kids are doing it wrong. You know, when they go on social media, they're doing silly things. They actually need to be able to hone what they're doing and to be able to go and present, whether it's to video or to a group of people, and assess that kind of thing as well.
No, you're absolutely right. In fact, when I had Lee Parkinson on and we talked about technology, you know, he said at the end of the day, everything is about writing first. So even now we're having this podcast, I've got my iPad because I've got the questions on. I've thought about the questions. We had a conversation. You know, it might be a loose plan, but there's a plan.
Definitely.
Otherwise, we're just chatting rubbish. You know, and it's that kind of thing, isn't it? That, yes, podcasts, they're still quite new, I think, even though they've been around a decade. You know, they're not Netflix yet, but it's coming. And soon everyone's going to be listening to podcasts. But at the end of the day, there is a plan behind it. You can't just go, oh yeah, I'll do a podcast today.
No, exactly. Yeah, you've got to plan it, haven't you?
Yeah. Okay, last question then. What did you want to be when you grew up?
I want to be an action hero. So not a superhero, but an action hero. I'm talking like Will Smith, Bruce Willis in Die Hard, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Last Action Hero. That was what I wanted to be. I wanted to go and act in action films. Obviously, it hasn't happened yet. There's still time.
That's growth mindset. Hasn't happened yet.
I also want to be a fireman, and if I'm way into teaching, so I can be an action hero every day.
No, that was cheesy.
That definitely was cheesy. Got that bit.
I'm not cutting that out. But thank you so much for joining me on the Teachers Podcast. It's been really, really useful, and I know it's going to be a great listen. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me on.